thank you everybody for attending today. We're excited to have you here. And like I said, we're here to talk about engaging youth through technology. So we hope you come out of this with a lot of good ideas that will help you with your work. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about three different projects, each quite a bit different from each other. The San Diego App Challenge, the WOW Nights at UCLA, and I Am Majority Youth Rally. Next slide. So my name is Craig Reed. I work in the San Diego County office. I'm a regional director and I work under the Binge Underage Drinking Initiative. So you'll be hearing me talk a lot about things that involve alcohol and alcohol harm prevention. With me today is Marina Cintron, who is from our LA office, and Carolina Gabaldon, who will also be with us, and she's from the San Bernardino County office. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about IPS. We're a public health agency that specializes in upstream prevention, which in our case means a lot of policy work, a lot of systems change, and a lot of work on equity. And we've been around since the 1990s and have been progressively improving our work and being more involved upstream ever since we started. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the San Diego App Challenge, which is the one I was involved in. We'll go over why we did it in the first place, how did it all get organized, and what were the kind of the resources we had to work with. Of course, we'll talk about results and lessons learned, which is probably where you get to learn from our successes as well as from our challenges. Next slide, please. So what was the challenge? So it was an app building challenge. You may have seen these in other places, but we found a great example from Palo Alto, California, where the city itself put forth an app challenge. And then after they were done, they actually created a handbook on how to do this. So we used that material as kind of a basis for starting our own app challenge. One thing that we really thought was interesting about this is that no programming was required. So it was allowed, really focused on the creativity of the participants and being solution-based rather than worrying about whether you know how to program it in the first place. So so it's mostly about concepts of what the app should be and how it should function. And with our particular work, we were focused on things that would reduce alcohol-related harms with our particular app challenge. Next slide, please. So why do this in the first place? Well, we still had deliverables to meet, despite the fact that the pandemic was happening. It was we started all this back a few months after everybody had to go back to their homes to work, and so we still had to meet our deliverables for our county contracts. Another thing is that we realized early on that youth were feeling pretty powerless or not feeling very powerful and isolated. And we wanted to bring back youth into the process and help be part of solutions again. So we thought by engaging them with an app challenge, that would help get them back engaged in this. We also love the fact that there was a social component because it was the idea was we're going to have youth groups work in teams. And therefore, there would be this automatic way of interacting with each other and having some socialization, even if it is on a computer, at least to provide that opportunity. And also, this was our opportunity to experiment with new approaches. We had never done one of these before. We were excited to try new things. As with anybody who is going through a pandemic, suddenly you have to throw out some of the old ways of doing things and embrace some new ones. And this is one of the new things that we embraced. Next slide, please. So with our approach, we fortunately had a lot of partner organizations that had youth groups that, associated with them. So we knew we automatically had a number of participants that would be ready to go once we rolled this out. We also had have student interns that would be interested as well. They're usually college age, and we were targeting this app challenge for teens and college age students. So once again, a great fit to have them participating and getting involved. We developed a timeline so that way we kind of had some structure and kind of matched up the needs of our contracts because we had to finish up deliverables by the end of a particular fiscal year, and as well as being very conscious of the fact that students are going to be leaving for the summer and coming back in the fall. So we're trying to be very respectful of all those timelines. we found that there was a lot of great resources out there. We did not realize how many free online start your own or develop your own app programs there were out there. So we were excited to find those and share those with our participants. We found that there were local developers at San Diego State University and UCSD that were happy to help us out. And then also we found somebody that was an actual web developer who actually knew programming, who was willing to, as an award, help the winner develop their actual app. So taking it from the concepts of which we saw and bring it into a fully functioning app that everybody could use. Next slide, please. We also had a media plan for this. So part of this was to draw attention to it and get participants, because we wanted more than just the student groups of the regional providers and others that we work with regularly. We wanted to get outside of our bubble a little bit and get the students involved. We also knew that based on what we saw in the timeline, this was going to be a several month process. So we wanted to keep the momentum going, and we thought a media plan would help with that. Also, we wanted to highlight alcohol-related problems for our participants. So they're not just building the app, they're learning about alcohol-related problems right there in their neighborhood as they're developing the app. So they understood what the nature of the problem was that they're trying to address. And then we also wanted to really emphasize social media. We have been playing around with social media prior to the pandemic, but we really wanted to up our game and take it to a whole new level. Also, we had a great website, allowed for where people could register. They could look at the rules for what the submissions need to look like and what the judging criteria would be, so they get a really good touch base of what the whole app challenge looked like. And then last but not least, we were going to have a big media launch event that was just to get everything rolling and kind of announce the start of all this. And we were really excited for that and did very well, as you'll find out shortly. Next slide, please. So these are our partner organizations. And as you can see, they represent the 6 regions that we find in San Diego County. So the great news is that we had somebody from every single part of San Diego County that was able and willing to participate. And all of them have youth groups and or college students that were involved in their work. Next slide, please. And the way we approached it is promoted it is as a Sober Curious app challenge is the way we kind of did this. Sober Curious, for those who don't know, is this idea of having teens delay the onset of their drinking and having college students, if they have started, to consider reducing their drinking habits. So therefore, not all social activities have to involve alcohol, and the Sober Curious movement really promotes that option of not having to drink in order to feel part of the ongoings of a gathering or party or other activities. So we thought that was a great kind of way to push it out there as a way of promoting the Sober Curious movement. But we also, when we pitched it to our colleagues, was that this is a way to get more involved with our youth and college students within the regions. They're more and more online every day. The pandemic made that even more so, and this was a great opportunity to engage them in virtually as well. And our long-term goal was, if everything works out well, we wanted to turn this social movement of Sober Curious that's been around for a few years into more of a long-term lifestyle choice for all the participants. So therefore, we're not just having something that goes on until the end of the app challenge, but something that continues further on after that. Next slide, please. And this was our tentative timeline. Like I mentioned before, part of this timeline was due to when we had to meet our deliverables as a contractor to the County of San Diego, but also it also takes into consideration the timeline of when school starts and stops for both college students and teens. So we have, this is just our approximate ideas of what we thought we would do. So we would get everybody into the app challenge in May. We were hoping that the students that stick around during summer, which we expected to be a significant number, but not everybody, could go through some workshops with app developers and kind of get some hands-on training prior to the actual app challenge. And then sometime in fall, we would start having submissions and start judging them. And then in late fall, probably close to the holiday season, we were considering having a press conference announcing our finalists, and then giving kind of highlighting those on the website, and then showcasing them to the community so everybody could be in kind of see what ideas have come out of this, and then having our grand finale sometime in December, right after the school year. Next slide, please. And we promoted this through a lot of different ways. We did our traditional media advocacy, so we got out there to KUSI, which is a radio station, a TV station here, Kogo Radio, our radio station here, as well as print media. Next advance, Brittany. But we also came up with quite a few social media posts that were regularly going to engage students. So we had what we called Resource Tuesdays. So all of those app resources I told you about earlier, we were highlighting one or two of them every week for the participants. And so they got a combination of posts about alcohol-related harms to be aware of, as well as, you know, hey, here's a source where you can start learning how to develop an app, and you can design it through this app, and it's totally free. So we love that type of combination. It's very low cost to entry. Next advancement. And then last but not least, as we had participants sign up, we tried to highlight why they were interested in the app challenge through short videos that were posted on primarily Instagram. And just to kind of create more of a human connection between all the participants. Next slide, please. And let's not forget the website. We were very excited to have this up and running. And we, which I mentioned before, it had our criteria for how to submit, how the judging would be, and it was also a place to register so you could be a participant and receive updates. Next slide, please. So the results, we had great media event launches, and we ended up going from not having just one media event launch, but two. One during the summer and one during the fall when the students all came back. We realized that was an important thing to do. We had 10 teams register, which was exciting to us. So we were great to see that we had quite a bit of representation across the county. And we saw with our social media that they were regularly being engaged. The interactions were very good. And the submissions we started seeing come in were very creative. We loved the thought that was going into them. And it was clear that team members that were part of the app challenge were having fun in the process. And that was an important aspect for us as well. Next slide, please. Now, unfortunately, only 2 teams completed their submissions, which is unfortunate. We were very excited to see 10. And then when we saw 2 and we had the teams have to drop out for one reason or another, I don't think it was necessarily through our fault, but just simply that pandemic related things were happening that were disrupting the lives of the students, and we were experiencing some of that. Our workshops, unfortunately, did not happen as we were hoping during the summer. Thanks to the pandemic, our connections to SDSU and UCSD apparently broke, and we were unable to make arrangements for those workshops with the people we had identified who were eager to get involved. And on top of all that, our programmer left the country during the pandemic for some other work. So we didn't have our award as we were hoping. Nonetheless, as I mentioned a little later, we did have some way of acknowledging our winners. And also we didn't have the media coverage in the announcement of the winner as we did for the actual launch, as I'll get into in a little bit. Next slide, please. So this is what our original timeline looked like, and you can advance it, Brittany. This is what it really turned out to be. So 2 things had to be cut out over time, and like I said, we had to have a second launch. But by and large, we stuck pretty close to our timeline. We were trying to start in May. We ended up launching in June. We were trying to wrap up by December, and we ended up doing it in January. Next slide, please. So lessons learned. First off was technology burnout happens. I think that what we were finding is that everybody was moving towards engaging students virtually. And so we were competing with others who were doing the same thing. And so understandably, some of the participants had to choose different priorities over time, and that's fine. The media was not interested in the new news, at least for announcing our winners. At the time at which we were trying to get the word out about our winner, they said, if it's not about COVID or fires, we're not interested. And also our timeline was both too short in a way and too long simultaneously. In some ways, it was too long from a media perspective. So trying to keep that interest from reporters was a challenge because of how long it was. On the other hand, students only had a short amount of time to really develop their app. And so we kind of had to push and pull that of this the entire time. Next slide, please. However, some great news is our social media skills improved greatly thanks to the app challenge. In fact, later, as we started playing with more social media after the app challenge was done, we took our lessons and were able to get 10,000 or more impressions. So, and people engaging with our social media very regularly. So we could see the difference in before the pandemic and after the pandemic of how well our social media was working suddenly. It helped us rethink our media advocacy efforts. A lot of times we had been thinking more in just getting reporters out there, and now we're thinking, how do we do that and tie it together with social media? And last but not least, we all had a lot of fun, we learned a lot, and we definitely would do this again. Next slide, please. So here are the winners, the winning team. And I would show you everything that they did, but what they gave us was about a 40 slide power presentation plus other documentation. They were thorough, and it was exciting to see how much effort they put into it. It was they clearly were excited about it and were super engaged. Next slide, please. And this is just the one of their many slides in which they had, and you could see that they were looking at this app challenge because it was regarding alcohol. We're looking at how the app should treat and interact with somebody who is under the age of 21 versus somebody who is 21 or older, or maybe somebody who's in recovery. We loved that. We loved the customization that they were proposing, not just because of the age of the person, but choosing your landscapes, for example, or having a mascot help walk you through. We just really enjoyed looking through this. The judges loved it, and we were just excited to see this. And last but not least, one thing that we did do since we didn't get media coverage is that we fortunately have colleagues that have regular events. So what we did is we had them come and present an overview of their presentation at one of our colleagues' events. So they had a chance to showcase this with pride and really were excited about that. And so it may not have been the media coverage we were hoping for, but we still got the word out there and they really were excited about it. Next slide, please. And now I'll turn everything over to Marina, who will talk about her program.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maurina Cintron. I'm a program manager with the Institute for Public Strategies. I am in the LA County office. And so today I'm going to be talking to you about Wellness Our Way, WOW Nights at UCLA. Next slide, please. So what are WOW Nights? WOW Nights are a large virtual events in partnership with UCLA and UCLA student groups, clubs, and organizations unofficially, aiming to support college-aged adults that might be struggling with alcohol use, substance use, or staying sober. These nights were organized in segments to address different subjects, mindfulness, fun, and also to give the participants local resources. Next slide. So why did we develop WOW Nights? The overarching issue is alcohol and substance misuse, especially in the times of COVID, but also addressing isolation, stress, the burnout, the fatigue, and real world trauma, like our political landscape and all the movements that were going on, especially during the summer. Next slide. So I'm going to be breaking it down a little bit more, but I'm going to be talking about the planning, the logistical pieces, how we recruited, and how we measured our success for each step. Next slide. So planning, partnership, budget, availability, and timelines. Now, one thing that I wanted to just put in the forefront is when we started organizing WOW Nights, we really focused on getting student input. So we did have a student subcommittee. This subcommittee was formed from all different departments that had student interns, different types of student groups, from Greek life to Res Life to Student Wellness Commission and things like that. So with their advice and their suggestions and how to get the most for our WOW Nights, we definitely made them our core voice in all of planning. So the results for this is that the student groups, just having those student groups and then knowing that our budget was from 0 to 0. We did for our kickoff, however, did have a small stipend for a special guest just based on what our first night was. And then always keeping in mind that the students are all over the place. Now, for the pandemic or in the light of the pandemic, all our students either went back to their countries or they were schooling in different time zones. Their classes were super hectic. And every single department and student group were also doing virtual events to keep their participants engaged too. So each semester for these nights were on different days, just based on availability. And we decided to make WOW Nights, instead of one large one-time event, we made them into a series. And we did one large event per semester. Next slide. Now, the logistical pieces that we considered were the branding, the registration or not, the platforms that we were going to use and what kind of segments we wanted, and then what were going to be the partner roles. The results were with our partners, we let our partners, and again, that subcommittee, really brand what it was going to look like, what the feel was going to be for these nights. And one major thing that the students definitely emphasized was making it accessible and minimizing any barriers. So we had an open link. Nobody had to register. People can come in and out for the night. The chat rooms were open we ended up using Zoom because of all the features that Zoom allowed us to have. And we really appreciated the breakout rooms because each room had different things that you can do and connect with different people. So people were able to jump in and out of the breakout rooms how they wanted to make them feel like that they can control how their night was gonna go for the WOW Nights. And we wanted to emphasize that each event was gonna build on the next one. When it came to having our partners, we wanted to make sure that no one person or one group had the responsibility twice. So if one group decided to MC for the night, then they didn't feel the pressure of MCing for the other nights. If they helped even recruiting groups, that at one point in time, they didn't have to have that pressure of recruiting more. Everybody agreed to whatever they could bring to the table was accepted, and there was no high bar for that. Next slide. So touching on recruitment is, we really only had for our flyers that were created social media, and through the social media, and each group had their own listserv, and we all decided to do word of mouth, and each group also had their own newsletters. So really spreading the word in that way. So everybody committed to the same actions, either to post, to share, to pass along in the meetings, and if they were a part of other events, to also let everybody know about WOW Nights. And one of the things that started becoming a theme later on was and bring a friend. Make a friend, bring a friend. And that really did help with the connection piece of our WOW nights. Next slide. Now, how we decided to measure our success was for the people in attendance of each night, our social media engagement, and then we did create a questionnaire. So the results of those questionnaires as well. And the questionnaire, the breakdown of it was really, really simple, and it was not long. It was basically, how did the participant like the night? Would they come again? Would they tell a friend? Did they make a friend? Did they feel more relaxed? Or did they feel less stress? Did they want to use? It did ask personal questions like if they had been using substances like alcohol and other drugs. Did they want to use after attending the event? And then also one of the key elements was, what would they like to be a part of later on down the line for other WOW nights? So we took advantage of that questionnaire to ask them what they wanted to be a part of, and what kind of WOW event that we can create later on. And that also was part of the student input. So having the participants that were students be able to tell us what they want. So again, it is emphasizing the student voice. Overall, our WOW nights reached over 3,600 students at UCLA. Next slide. So some of the highlights, WOW night number 1 is on the top of the screen. It was Comic Night, which was in partnership with UCLA Shenanigans Comedy Group. We also were able to get a small stipend, like I mentioned, to have Irene Tu. She is a Comedy Central comic, to come in and not only do a set, but talk to the other comedian students that want to make this something, maybe their side gig or their career. And really having that intimate conversation really helped these students. As you can see on their faces, they're really enjoying that one-on-one and having fun, and being able to switch jokes and using their jokes on the student groups to get some of their structure pretty down on paper. At the bottom left, you'll see that, the bottom 2 pictures will show you our segments, our mindfulness segment. We did have CAPS, which is counseling and psychology department, run us through what it is to be stressed out and acknowledging what your body feels and how we cope with it. And then a tool that each participant could take with them. So taught them a tool of how to help themselves relieve that stress and use it in their daily lives. Again, the same thing was brought to in partnership with Dee Dee Hirsch, which is a local treatment center. She decided to do a meditation and focusing on mindfulness and showing students how to meditate in the traditional and non-traditional sense. Next slide. So here are our 3 large events. You'll see Late Night with Irene Tu. We did have our second event, which was Escape Room Night. So each emphasizing the breakout rooms, each breakout room had a different escape room idea, and students and participants can pick which breakout room they wanted to go in just based on the topic. And they were able to connect with other, because you have to work together for the escape room. So connecting, making new friends, and bringing a friend. And then our last one, we emphasize the meditation session. And as you can see, the last 2 flyers here does say to de-stress, reconnect, and have fun. So invite a friend. Also, I wanted to point out the student groups that we partnered with, which was the Student Wellness Commission, Shenanigans Comedy Group, Total Wellness Magazine, which is a student-ran magazine at UCLA, the SHEP, which is the Health Center, Education and Promotion Center, they have interns. So using their interns, which is also a group, and then CAPS. We also partnered with Active Minds, UCLA, UCLA Res Life, and DD Hirsch. Next slide. So some additional highlights is we did get an opportunity to record the mindfulness segments using our virtual questionnaire before, after, and during the events was really, really helpful, making them accessible and really short. So we made them into bit.ly links to make it really easy to type in and get to. And then really promoting and supporting resources. So one thing that came to light was UCLA had a huge amount of resources for their students. But one thing that was missing is a one place platform for all the students to engage in. So if you wanted certain services, you had to go to different websites or different departments or call on different people. And so making all those resources available in one place was one of the things that we were able to do. And then pass that along during our WOW nights, and then of course as follow-ups. And then again, making these things available on our social media platforms and sending them out via e-newsletter. So because we recorded the mindful segments, we were able to edit them, to shorten them, and then having that be placed with our partners at UCLA, and them also sending it out to their groups and letting them know that these things were available to whoever wanted to access them, even if they weren't a student. Next slide. So lessons learned, pivot, pivot, pivot. As Craig mentioned, technology burnout, and for college students, definitely felt the burnout because they were trying to keep up with classes. Some were still working during the pandemic. Some of them had to move back in with their families, or felt crowded. So they definitely burned out a lot faster. I did want to mention on the side that WOW Nights was competing against many, many different virtual events. So at the university is known to having a different and an array of social events that on campus and off campus. And so now everybody was trying to do them in a virtual setting. And so competing and trying to engage students was one of the most difficult parts, but really having that accessibility helped. So one of the things that we wanted to manage is making sure that our large events were really engaging. So having the different segments, not asking participants to turn on their video or even having to say anything verbally or typing anything in the chat. We didn't, they wanted to answer questions, they could. If they didn't, they just wanted to be there and just be in a virtual setting that had no pressure, they were allowed to do that. And then allowing a break time for participants to chat amongst themselves and not having the MC kind of having them walk through the virtual night. And then so touching back on, there was a lot of students that were just not interested, but then because they had already been doing virtual nights every single night, UCLA and their groups as a whole were doing virtual nights Sunday through Saturday. So we found out later that we were competing against over 120 something virtual events per week, just based on the department and the other student groups that were trying to do something during the night as well. So understanding that. And then not enough notice and too much notice. When posting and when mentioning our event and things like that, if we mentioned it too much in advance, students would forget. And if we mentioned it or start advertising it too late, or too close to the actual event, students were already booked for another event. So finding that sweet spot was difficult. And then our timeline did end up getting pushed based on the different events, because we wanted to make sure that everybody had input, especially from our subcommittee. Because we know how hectic the students' lives were, we wanted to make sure that they had enough time to respond to the WOW nights. So reconnecting with them, giving them time, not making them feel like they had to give input, really helped. Next slide. So a lot of our success, I'm going to mention our questionnaire just to share most of our results, is a lot of people or a lot of participants indicated that they felt relaxed after participating in a WOW night. They felt like they were connected. Either they connected with new people, or they reconnected with a friend that they haven't seen, right? They felt less stress, and they did indicate that they didn't want to use either alcohol, cannabis, or tobacco. And for the participants that really did feel that stress and that burden of life, they felt hopeful. They felt like they had the resources, or at least access to the resources that they didn't even know that were given to them for free. And for the numbers, for the people that love numbers, so 79% of participants stated that they felt connected to their peers after attending a WOW night. And 71% of participants stated that they felt relieved, stress-free after a WOW night. So I really do feel that our WOW nights were effective. And then to a couple of the quotes is, it's a good, and these quotes are also for when we wanted to promote more of the WOW nights in meetings. We wanted to make sure that they could share what the participants had already indicated to get people invested and engaged in the next WOW night. So it's a good way to de-stress and meet new people. I loved reconnecting with friends. And one thing that I forgot to mention, but I thought is very, very powerful, is that the third WOW night, we did a Jeopardy game. And that was mostly, and the behind the scenes focus for that Jeopardy game was for all the first years who didn't have that advantage of getting a campus tour and finding out all the funny nuances of their campus. And so the student group who created that Jeopardy game made sure to include all the questions, or almost all the questions, that they would have gotten the answers to when they did their tour all around campus, based on departments and buildings and student groups and clubs. So for the undergrads, that really helped them kind of feel like they were actually a student. Having that student engagement really helped them, and they felt like that was something that they really missed out on. So they were happy that that Jeopardy night happened. And it was hosted by sophomores and juniors that had the opportunity to have that tour on campus. So next slide. Next slide, please. Oh. And to present our next presenter, Carolina.
So good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Carolina.
Okay. All right, I'm just not seeing me on the video, so I'm just wondering what happened here. So do you want me to go ahead?
Yep, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself. You're good to go. You're pinned, and I can see you.
All right, perfect. So my name is Carolina Gabaldon. I am a prevention specialist in San Bernardino County, working in the High Desert and East Valley regions with Institute for Public Strategies. And today what we're going to go over is the I in Majority rally. We're going to talk a little bit about planning, how we transformed a in-person event to the virtual environment. We're also going to share some highlights of the event and go over lessons learned. Next slide. So what was the IN Majority Rally? So overall, what the IN Majority Rally was a celebration of the fact that most youth do not use alcohol or other substances. The theme of our rally was, how do you put the I in the majority of youth who do not use alcohol or other substances? And our overall goal was to use the social norms approach to inform youth and young adults that the majority of their peers do not engage in substance misuse and share positive coping strategies. Some of the educational aspects to it were myths and facts of different types of substances, which I'll get into a little bit later. And then we're going to share some of the positive coping strategies that our youth decided to share with their peers. Next slide. So these are our youth mentors. Our youth mentors are youth members of the High Desert Community Coalition, which is dedicated to addressing substance misuse problems in the High Desert region. They were composed of both middle and high school students in the High Desert area. And next year, we hope to have a wider range of youth mentors from different areas of San Bernardino County. The youth mentors shared myths and facts related to opioids, alcohol, underage cannabis use, and methamphetamine misuse. And they also shared refusal skills, and their overall aim was to promote a sober mind for youth success. Next slide. So in the planning process, we held weekly facilitator planning and strategy meetings, and then bi-weekly we held strategy meetings with our youth mentors. We took a countywide approach, being that we cover High Desert and East Valley regions of San Bernardino County. And as to the when were we going to host this event? So we're looking to coordinate this with National Prevention Week and other youth majority rallies across the nation that celebrated the fact that most youth do not engage in substance use. And then the next part of our planning process was to consider the fact that we might want to take this to an annual youth event if we were successful. Next slide. So in the wake of COVID, and due to the fact we couldn't hold in-person meetings and they weren't possible, we transformed our in-person event into the virtual environment by making it a virtual youth rally. So in the virtual environment, we were considering how we were going to share positive coping strategies through a virtual platform. And we settled on feature guests and video submissions by other youth and young adults across San Bernardino County. And to do this, we considered common youth activities during COVID, which was social media platforms. So our mentors suggested that we use video submissions of their positive coping strategies and healthy behaviors to share alternatives to negative behaviors of using substances. Next slide, please. So some of the tools that we used in our event included, the most important one was our media plan. We wanted this event to not be too long due to virtual fatigue that both Craig and Marina have talked about. I'm going to share a little bit with you on how we overcame that a little bit later. But our media plan was our primary tool that we used to structure our event so that each co-host had adequate time. We were able to incorporate our featured guests, our video compilation, and some other highlights that we wanted to share. Another tool that we used was Eventbrite to engage participation, both from our community partners as well as other youth and young adults from across San Bernardino County. And then we also used a virtual guest book so that Youth and young adults who were not able to submit their videos or photos or quotes could still participate by sharing how they put the eye in majority of those who did not use alcohol or other substances. Next slide, please. So once again, our video submissions were short clips sharing how they put the eye majority of youth who are substance free. So some of our submissions showed positive coping strategies such as skateboarding, boxing. There were several different ways: karate, dance, community service, or a lot of different ways that youth shared how they engage in positive, healthy behaviors to avoid alcohol and substance misuse. We also included this event on many different social media platforms. We used Facebook, we used Instagram, YouTube, and the most popular one of today's youth and young adults is TikTok. Going back to our virtual guest book, the tool that we happened to use was BraveNet. The BraveNet virtual guest book allows up to 500 posts that are free. And once again, the purpose of this virtual guest book was to allow those who did not submit videos or images to share how they put the eye in majority. We also had additional support from our educational institutions at both the middle, high school, and college levels, as a lot of our participants that did submit videos were from each one of those age categories. Our video event, our virtual rally, was promoted by news articles and radio announcements. And next, we're going to go over some challenges that we had during the planning process. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges that we had with our virtual event was scheduling. Our youth, because of the different grade levels that they were in, frankly, and their different school schedules, we had trouble coordinating a time where we were able to get them involved to schedule a live performance. So we decided to overcome this by using pre-recorded videos and then hosting the rally with a live showing of our event. So in the recordings, we did pre-recorded videos for each co-host that was aimed to meet their schedule and their availability. Our next challenge that we had was limited feature guests. So our original idea was that we were going to have maybe youth bands or performers that would hold the attention of a youth audience in person. And in transforming this to the virtual environment, we had little interest in participation, or maybe even not as much time in planning it and securing those feature guests that we wanted. So we overcame this with videos from other substance misuse prevention providers and organizations that promote a natural high. And so we ended up including a couple different videos from Natural High, from youth-oriented speakers and mentors that shared how they used positive coping strategies to overcome peer pressure and things like that related to substance misuse. So our next challenge was limited experience with technology. I think with COVID, we all had to overcome these challenges at one point, and particularly for our youth who were the primary planners in this event, we wanted to use a platform that they were most familiar with. So most of the schools have been using Zoom, and so we used a platform that was familiar to them, and kind of helped build their skills on how to record on Zoom and use these in short segments so that the co-hosts could record their own videos and then go back and re-record if they wanted to. And let's see, we have two more, or this is our two more challenges. So this one is related to virtual fatigue. So Craig and Marina have also talked a lot about virtual fatigue, and this was real. It's real for us as as professionals, and even more so for our youth who spent hours on meetings for school. And some of the ways that we were able to overcome this was with short segments, not just for our youth co-hosts who were recording their videos, but we wanted to keep the virtual rally engaging. So we shifted from topic to topic, and we use different forms of engagement. I'm going to share some of those in the highlights. So our last challenge that we had was limited participation. We had hoped that we would get a whole bunch of videos submitted, but reality was that just didn't happen at this stage of the game. So we were able to overcome the limited submission by creative compilations through the use of Canva. And we also allowed them to submit videos, not just videos, but photos and quotes for those who might not want to use their personal images online. Next slide, please. So some highlights of the event. This is just a sample of some of the clips that we had in our video compilation. We had pro skateboarders, we had custom shoe designers, we had boxers, we had individuals who took advantage of nature to help ease some of those issues that they might be dealing with stress, and shared that positive coping strategy. And then in our refusal tips section of the video, we incorporated the use of memes with the refusal skills. As you can see at the bottom, one of the things that you can say is, I don't have time for that. So we found a GIF for that, and we made a video compilation based on these GIFs that are popular to youth, young adults, and even older adults. Next slide, please. So in our reach, while the event was designed to celebrate the fact that the majority of youth do not use alcohol or other substances, we also wanted to reach the population of our youth and young adults who are not necessarily engaging in healthy behaviors. We wanted to let them know that it's never too late to start making healthy choices and using positive coping skills. And so we wanted to address that harsh reality that some teens have experimented with substances, but that they still have the opportunity to make healthy choices today. And this segment was also followed by stories of hope and healing that describe life after recovery. Next slide. So we also had some words of encouragement from city leaders. They shared what life was like for them as teens, and how they overcame peer pressure to become city leaders and professionals that help individuals keep a sober mind and refrain from substance use. And we had 3 different mayors from the high desert area, Apple Valley, Victorville, and Adelanto, share words of encouragement. And next slide, please. And furthermore, following the rally, our recognition for our youth mentors and co-hosts of the rally was held at a town council meeting in Apple Valley. The youth mentors received youth leadership trophies and a gift card that was donated by a partnering organization. So it's important to incorporate the award part of it, so that kids feel like they've made a big difference. Next slide, please. So outcomes and lessons learned. Some of the lessons learned in our event was some of the common knowledge that we have about engaging youth in activities, that we don't want it to just be an activity. We want it to promote a call to action. And in this case, our rally took the virtual event, which was an activity, but it promoted that call to action to either continue using positive coping strategies or to start using refusal tips. But overall, it was to engage youth, whether they are currently in the majority or they're not in the majority yet, to start engaging in those healthy, positive behaviors. Our next lesson learned was free tools. So I talked about BraveNet and how BraveNet was helpful in engaging youth that might not have been able to submit videos or photos and things like that. But there's a downfall to some free tools. Sometimes they don't always help us achieve the intended goals. And one of the examples of that was video submissions. We didn't get as many as we had hoped, just due to size limit and restriction of video uploads through free tool resources. So be sure to investigate what the limits are on your free tools before relying on them completely for your event. And then our last thing that we're going to talk about is planning ahead. So our virtual event was held in May, and we all know in May that some schools they're holding proms, they're preparing for graduation or other end of the school year events. And just consider that in your planning process, and make sure that if your youth are involved in activities like this, that it doesn't take up too much of their time during other events that they might be attending at the particular time you have planned your event. We also just want to stress the use of popular youth platforms to expand your reach. And thank you for watching our webinar. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Brittany.
Okay, thank you, Carolina, and thank you also to Craig and Marina. So I recognize that it is almost 11, but we did promise some time for Q&A. So as long as the panelists are willing, we will do that right now. So feel free, if you have any questions, to go ahead and drop them into the Q&A box. And before we head into that, I just want to mention, so we do have a survey. If you are willing to, and you'll have a minute of your time, you can scan the QR code. We'll also drop the survey link into the chat for ease of access. If you can go ahead and share your feedback, it's valuable to us. We really appreciate it, and it helps us plan for future webinars. And as I mentioned earlier at the start of the presentation, we will be sending a link out to the recording. We will also include the slide deck and any additional material that the presenters wanted to share. So those will include some links to information on the WOW Nights, as well as a link to the virtual prevention rally that Carolina talked about. And then I also want to note that IPS offers training and technical assistance for all of our core competencies. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, please feel free to reach out to us at info@publicstrategies. And so I will go ahead and turn it over to Nancy, who will kind of help us flow through the Q&A.
Yeah, so one of the questions that came up during, Marina, your presentation, your portion was, what is an ideal timeframe to promote virtual events?
Thank you. Yeah, so that is a tricky thing. We did many different flyers for one event. We started promoting 2 to 3 weeks prior to the actual event. We did a save the date. We did each week we would switch up the flyer just a little bit to make it kind of look new. And then we would promote it the week of, the day of, and the night right before the event kicked off. So it was like on a continuous basis for a good 2 to 3 weeks, but really emphasizing the week of.
Awesome, thank you. And another question posed. So Zachary says, very good webinar and information. Appreciate you all presenting. What are your top 3 tips for social media to engage youth? And maybe we can start with Craig and go to Marina and Carolina, or if anybody just wants to add anything.
Well, I'll say that our biggest success was with videos on Instagram. And as we're learning over time, videos are just turning overall much more effective in generating comments, reactions, sharing, all of that. So that's at least the top thing that I would say that we've learned out of this.
I think one of the tips when engaging youth is keeping them engaged even after the event. So making sure that whatever you're doing, if you can, record it, edit it, and have it where students or any participant can access it later on. So if they can't attend your event that night, they can still learn something or be a part of something or watch something.
So I just wanted to add to that, what Craig had suggested about videos. I'm seeing both on Facebook and Instagram that a lot of posts are getting more responses through reels and through stories, because people don't want to always take that time to scroll through posts. They just want to click stories and then kind of scan through things very quickly. So the use of videos in those particular platforms are very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you for answering. If there are any other questions, you can feel free to add those to the chat. But those are all the questions that were in the chat right now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nancy. So again, I just want to thank our panelists, Craig, Marina, and Carolina. Thank you all so much for being here and sharing how you have successfully engaged youth in our new COVID world. I really appreciate it, and hopefully all of our attendees appreciated it. So thank you, and thank you to all of our attendees for being here. If you want to, this recording will be up on our YouTube page, as are all of our other webinars that we've had in the past. So please feel free to head there. And thank you all.
Thank you.